Russia, the largest country on Earth, stretching across 11 time zones, blessed with immense natural resources and a population of more than 140 million people. On paper, it looks like the perfect recipe for an economic superpower, one that should rival the United States, Europe, or even China. And yet, despite its size and wealth, Russia finds itself at the center of a paradox. Its economy is far weaker than its geography would suggest. For years, we've heard the same soundbite repeated over and over again, that Russia's entire national output is comparable to that of individual US states like Texas or Florida. At first, this might sound like an exaggeration, until you realize that, in many ways, the Texan economy is not only larger, but healthier, more diversified, and more innovative than Russia's. Imagine that, a single American state outpacing the world's largest country. This contradiction becomes even more striking when you consider history. In the early 2000s, Russia's economy seemed unstoppable, fueled by high oil prices and rapid growth. Yet today, it struggles to keep pace with nations far smaller and less resource-rich. So what went wrong? That brings us to the core questions. How strong is Russia's economy really? What happened to derail the explosive growth it once enjoyed? And most importantly, is Russia truly in a position to sustain a costly and drawn-out conflict like the war in Ukraine? This journey isn't about military tactics or battlefield maneuvers, it's about economics. And through that lens, the story of modern Russia becomes both fascinating and, in many ways, tragic. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the world held its breath. The Cold War was over, but a terrifying question remained. What would happen to Russia, the country that inherited the Soviet nuclear arsenal, the command economy, and the political machinery of an empire? At the center of it all stood Boris Yeltsin, the first president of the newly born Russian Federation. For Western powers, the priority was clear. Russia must not slide back into communism, and its economy had to be transformed, fast. Out came a blueprint known as the Washington Consensus, a set of neoliberal prescriptions designed to turn a planned economy into a market-driven one. The recipe sounded simple enough. Cut subsidies, enforce fiscal discipline, reform taxes, free up trade, encourage foreign investment, privatize state-owned giants, and above all, protect private property. If Russia followed the manual, it was supposed to become a normal capitalist democracy. But reality was brutal. In practice, reform meant chaos. Russia rushed to liberalize trade, print a new ruble, and privatize industries at breakneck speed. Instead of creating a healthy middle class of entrepreneurs, privatization handed the crown jewels of the Soviet economy, oil, gas, and heavy industry, into the hands of a few well-connected men. Thus, the oligarchs were born. Corruption spread like wildfire. Money that should have rebuilt infrastructure and schools was siphoned into offshore bank accounts. Meanwhile, the government stubbornly defended an overvalued ruble, making it even easier for capital to flee the country. Then came the crash. In 1998, the perfect storm hit. The First Chechen War drained the treasury. The Asian financial crisis shook global markets, and Russia itself defaulted on its debt. The IMF and World Bank rushed in with a $22 billion bailout, but $5 billion vanished almost instantly, swallowed by corruption. By the end of the decade, Russia's GDP had collapsed to less than half of what it had been before the Soviet Union dissolved. The dream of a smooth transition to capitalism had turned into a nightmare. At the turn of the millennium, Russia was exhausted. The 1990s had left the country broken, its economy in ruins, its people disillusioned, its leaders mired in corruption. Into this chaos stepped a relatively unknown figure, Vladimir Putin. When he rose to power in 1999-2000, few could predict how dramatically he would reshape Russia's path. Putin's first move was political survival. He granted Boris Yeltsin and his family immunity from prosecution, essentially sweeping their corruption scandals under the rug. But unlike his predecessor, Putin knew he needed more than political deals. He needed results. He tightened state control over Russia's largest industries, particularly energy, and began building a more functional financial system. For the first time, ordinary Russians could access credit, open bank accounts, and even take consumer loans. It was a small revolution in daily life. Then came the stroke of luck. Oil prices soared. And in a resource-rich country like Russia, that meant a windfall. Billions of petrodollars poured into the treasury, fueling rapid GDP growth. Russians who had lived through the hungry 1990s suddenly saw rising wages, new cars, and bustling shopping malls. For many, it felt like a golden age, the moment Russia finally stood back up. When the global financial crisis struck in 2008, Russia's banking system was still underdeveloped, which ironically shielded it from the worst effects. Oil prices did crash and the economy stumbled, but recovery was swift. By 2013, Russia's GDP had multiplied tenfold compared to the depths of the 1990s. Yet, beneath the surface, the old paradox remained. Wealth was not evenly shared. The oligarchs, those same men who had seized control in the privatizations of the 1990s, now grew richer than ever, often with the Kremlin's blessing. For the average Russian, life was better, but the lion's share of prosperity flowed upward. In short, the Putin era of the 2000s delivered stability, growth, and national pride. But it also entrenched inequality, corruption, and dependence on oil, a foundation that would later prove dangerously fragile. In 2014, Russia shocked the world by annexing Crimea. The response was swift and severe. The United States, the European Union, Japan, Australia, and Canada unleashed a wave of sanctions that targeted the very heart of Russia's economy. Advanced oil and gas technology cut off. Credit lines for banks and energy giants severely restricted. Travel bans hit Putin's closest allies, signaling that Russia would pay a price for its bold move. At first glance, the impact seemed limited. Russia had accumulated massive foreign reserves thanks to years of oil and gas exports. When the ruble collapsed, the Kremlin spun it into a silver lining. Cheaper currency meant Russian exports suddenly became more competitive. But beneath this surface resilience, cracks were spreading fast. For ordinary citizens, life grew harder. Imported goods vanished from shelves, prices climbed, and inflation ate into wages. A trip to the grocery store became a reminder of geopolitical reality. Meanwhile, the oligarchs and the political elite, protected by their wealth and connections, felt little pain. In fact, some even grew stronger as sanctions forced more assets into domestic hands. By the late 2010s, Russia had become one of the most unequal societies on earth. If you count the vast fortunes hidden offshore, the gap between ordinary people and the oligarchs is staggering. And here lies the deeper tragedy. Russia's political system offers no real democratic mechanism for change. Power serves the few, not the many. Sanctions didn't break the Kremlin, but they hardened the system. A fortress state, resilient on the outside, but increasingly brittle within. By early 2022, Russia stood in a strange position. On one hand, it looked powerful, the world's third-largest energy exporter, flush with cash from oil and gas sales, and sitting on one of the largest foreign currency reserves on the planet. Decades of high energy prices had filled the Kremlin's vaults, giving Moscow the appearance of strength and stability. But peel back the surface and a different picture emerged. The Russian economy had long been designed not for the people, but for a narrow circle of elites. Wealth flowed upward, concentrated in the hands of oligarchs and power brokers, while ordinary citizens saw little improvement. Inequality was staggering. And when it came to sanctions, the record was clear. Previous punishments over Georgia, over Crimea, over cyber attacks had barely dented the system. Russia endured, adjusted, and kept selling energy to the world. The Kremlin grew confident that no outside force could truly shake its foundation. Yet the question lingered, louder than ever. When the West finally unleashed its most severe sanctions in history, would this fortress of oil, gas, and reserves hold, or would it crack? So, after decades of turbulence, oil booms, sanctions, and wars, where does Russia actually stand today? Let's break it down. Size of the economy. Russia's GDP sits at around $2.41 trillion, placing it roughly 12th in the world. On paper, that looks impressive. It's bigger than many countries. But compared to global giants, Russia is just a mid-tier player. Score: 8 out of 10. GDP per capita. Now the story shifts. With an average income of just $11,043 per person, Russia falls behind not only developed economies, but even trails China. For a nation that controls vast land and resources, this is shockingly low. Score: 5 out of 10. Growth. The 2010s should have been Russia's golden decade. Instead, corruption, cronyism, and costly conflicts strangled growth. Russia flatlined. Score: 0 out of 10. Stability and trust. For investors, Russia is a minefield. Political risks are sky high. Contracts mean little against the state, and sanctions make business unpredictable. Score: 0 out of 10. Industrial base. Here lies the Achilles heel. Russia still depends overwhelmingly on raw resources: oil, gas, minerals. Advanced industries? Minimal. Innovation? Lacking. Score: 3 out of 10. Put it all together, and Russia's economic report card totals 3.2 out of 10. Not the mark of a global superpower, but rather the profile of a struggling mid-size economy, closer to Cyprus or El Salvador than to the US, China, or even Germany. The paradox is striking. A country with nuclear weapons, endless land, and colossal resources, yet its economy ranks alongside nations many times smaller. Power on the battlefield, perhaps, but in the marketplace, Russia remains a giant with clay feet.